Real Conversations, we back again. We all know what we're here for. Attorney Harry Daniels has agreed to come back and help us with this particular situation. Well, just in case you don't know why we are here, the decision to come and talk about this particular case at this time, since I've started the channel, I've kind of been trying to create a voice of fact and reason. And if I don't speak about this subject, then other people are going to speak about the subject that I think may be less qualified, or are going to speak to emotion and maybe cite things in this situation. And so what I always want to do is I want to bring the experts. I want to bring the people with the know-how in this situation, just to kind of give a perspective that most might not get. So what we have is Mr. George Floyd, in a terrible chain of events where he was killed by law enforcement. I was telling Attorney Daniels earlier, for me personally, this was probably the worst one that I've seen. Normally in situations like this, there's a fight. With the Mr. Arbery situation, which was terrible as well, there was a shooting that was going on. If anybody's going to look at the video, and obviously I'll post the video, this young man was on the ground for seconds on end, no struggle, and the officer had his knee on his neck. And, you know, some time went by, nobody's doing anything. The other officers are just sitting there until the young man passed away. It's bad, you know. I lost some sleep about it last night. Again, I texted my good friend, Attorney Daniels, from a civil rights attorney from Atlanta, to come and speak about it a lot. He deals with these cases all the time. What was your initial reaction to the actual video and the information that we have thus far, Attorney Daniels? Again, thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks, John. My initial reaction is, here we go again. Here we go again. It's almost like it's a daily occurrence that somebody send me a text or tag me on some type of social media platform of a act against blacks and acts against blacks against those who are there sworn to protect and serve. And this Mr. Ford situation is unconscionable, and it is a act that I perceive to be a choking, a suffocation, by pressing a knee on his neck until he ultimately led to his death. You know, it's inexcusable. He was handcuffed. There's multiple officers there to subdue, detain, and control. And I believe those officers who were just standing, they are just responsible as an officer who was actually engaged with Mr. Ford, who ultimately killed Mr. Ford. For whatever reason, they thought their acts were justifiable. They wasn't. Doesn't matter what the original stop incident was about. There was no justification whatsoever. There was nothing that would need to be escalated to the point that you kill a man. There's nothing there that warrants this murderer. He's not, to me, should be the dignity of being called the officer's action. And the mayor of Minneapolis, Minnesota, is spot on. Why is this person not charged? Why is this person not in custody and locked up away from the community? Because his vigilante and heinous act against mankind.
So if you haven't seen, a couple of hours ago, the mayor of Minneapolis came out and it seemed as though he was charging the prosecutor, the DA, the head DA of that town, to go ahead and lock these guys up, which I wholeheartedly agree with, which was the opposite, I guess, of the situation with Mr. Arbery's situation. Let me ask you this specifically. The first video that we saw and the first video that I saw was one where the officer's knee was already on his neck. The guy, Mr. George Floyd was already on the ground. He was handcuffed. Is there anything that you could think of that could have escalated the situation to put them actually in that position where they were? And how long would they need to stay there for that to be justified? Or can you think of any situation where that would be justified?
Well, it was already in the prone position from when the video started, when the individual had his knee on his neck. And at this point, obviously, there was no escalation that was needed to have him in that position. And not just that, have him in that position, but have the knee in the back of the neck the way he did. And like I told you before, it was other officers there available to remedy any situation, to control, and for suspect safety or officer safety. It was more than enough. If you got 4 officers, you got 1 person, then you know that promotes the safety of the officers and the safety of the suspect at the time. But obviously, the other officers stood by, and while he just basically bared all his weight, and he seemed like he was a pretty large-sized guy, bared all his weight on the resting, his knee rested on the back of Mr. Floyd. It's Mr. Floyd, right?
Yeah, Mr. George Floyd, yes.
Mr. Floyd's neck. That there was nothing that would warrant that type of subduing or any submission or whatever he's trying to, actions he was trying to perform to control the issue, because Mr. Floyd was handcuffed in a prone position. And not just that, John, he was telling the man he can't breathe.
Yeah.
His head, his neck, his chest, his stomach, that I can't breathe. And essentially the breath and the life was leaving his body at that time. I can't breathe. My chest hurt, my stomach hurt. All those upper extremities, vital organs are starting to shut down for lack of oxygen. Liver.
Yeah.
So I can't breathe. And obviously at that juncture, if you can't breathe, you can't fight. So obviously he was there in a position where he was completely subdued, and there was nothing warrant that type of actions. But also the chokehold has been determined to be an illegal tactic at this point across America. Essentially, that was a form of a chokehold, but implied a knee to the back of the neck.
Yeah. You mentioned before that he, as well as the gentleman who were on looking, so I'm gonna do my best to refer all of my factual questions to Attorney Daniels. I'm going to speak to what I saw, because there's an emotional aspect to the video as well, right? So when we're seeing this, and these 3 gentlemen, 3 or 4 officers who are standing there and doing nothing, and then what Attorney Daniels has said is that they're just as culpable. Tell me why they're culpable to Mr. George Floyd when you look at this and what ultimately happened to him, and what should have they?
I mean, that's why they was fired. That's why they was fired by the city of Minneapolis, because you just can't stand by. You can't use that standby immunity or say, hey, listen, I wasn't doing it. It's like this. Here's how you got to think about it in law enforcement context. If you are officer of the law, all right, and you see another officer breaking the law, you have an oath and duty to stop crime. Doesn't matter if they got a blue uniform on and a badge.
Say that again. Say that again. Say that again. Say that again.
If you are an officer of the law and you with another officer of the law and you see that officer breaking the law, it is your duty, the oath you have taken, to stop that crime, prevent that crime, and arrest that person. You have a duty. You have an oath of office. Every officer take that. Law enforcement have an oath of office to do that. And if you don't do that, and you stand by while that officer breaks the law, then you are just as guilty, and just as culpable of the action of that other officer. We saw the same thing with the Walter Scott case, when he was shot in the back. The other officer took the taser and placed it beside Walter Scott body. I'm referring to Walter Scott in South Carolina. You remember that case, right?
Yes, sir. Give a couple brief facts for
Yeah,
some of the
Walter Scott was stopped in South Carolina. I want to say it was maybe Charleston, maybe Columbia. I'm not particularly sure of the city. He was stopped in South Carolina, and it was determined he had a warrant for child support, something to that effect. And he takes off running. The officer chases him, and the officer catch up to him and essentially execute him, shoot him in the back. While Mr. Scott falls to the ground, officer goes over, takes his taser, and drop it beside him. There was another officer present. That officer corroborated the officer who in fact killed Mr. Scott's story. All right. Officer Scott was officer who shot him was fired and prosecuted, and that officer also was fired. I don't know about the prosecution, but he corroborated the story, and he know that the officer shot and killed Mr. Scott while he's running away, and he placed the taser besides Mr. Scott's body to go to comply with his story, just to say that he was using self-defense or stop a person who had took his taser from him. So those type of cases where you have officers that's watching, or law enforcement officers or deputy sheriffs or whoever watching other officers break the law and commit acts, those officers is just as culpable, just as liable. Now I understand you may have an incident where an officer does something in a split moment, all right, and you're not really standing by. It happened, you do it, and it's over, all right. Or like an officer shoots somebody, and you right there, it's over. But you have a duty to be truthful, to give truthful statements to the investigators for that person to be charged. But if you lie, fabricate, then you can be just as culpable of the officer that's involved in the incident. But in this situation with Mr. Floyd, the officers are standing by, and they're standing, watching, standing up. You know, I'm sure they think in their mind that, hopefully they think in their mind like, hey man, it's wrong. You know, we need to do something.
Yeah, but how that's my thing, Attorney Daniels. How do we get here? That to me, and I've never been to that town before, speaks to a normal course or a culture that's already been built for anyone to be put through that much pain and no one else even flinch. I mean, not even a movement. Like, we're just standing around in broad daylight. No, it's incredible that it was in the middle of town, and you don't see anybody react in any type of way.
When you have here's the thing, and this is why it's a growing crisis, and it's been a crisis, not growing, but it's continuing to magnify and grow. When it comes to people of color being subdued, or whatever the police are doing to them, people seem as though that, hey, the officer are justified in their actions, or they are glad the officer's there to protect and serve, and they only look to the color of that person, not the acts of the officers. We saw it in a good what is very, very telling. Very telling. Have you seen the video of the woman in Central Park and the dog?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That is very telling how some people, non-minorities, non-blacks, white people, some white people, not all, think, and how the society deems and look on blacks, especially black males. And she knows that. And she played up to that. And she said, hey, I'm going to tell that you're African American and you threatened the life of me and my dog. And when she got on the phone, she did her job. She got an Oscar when she got on that phone. Did you hear how her voice changed? How she was like she was breathing heavy, like she was in distress, because she know that provokes action. And now that man who's completely innocent is becoming a suspect, public enemy number one, and for them to come, and if he don't cooperate in any means to justify the actions. And that's the mindset of America. A lot of people in America, that is the mindset. That is why Mr. Floyd can lay on the ground with the breath being choked out of him and nobody do anything about it. She gave America an inner thought of some people of what they think about black people. And she played upon that. That's why Mr. Floyd is gone and dead today and no longer on this earth. That's why. It is a assault, systemic racism, and it's not about, we can, the mayor of Minneapolis can talk about whatever they want to do, and I commend them for acting swiftly.
Yeah, yes.
I commend them for acting swiftly, for firing and asking for charges. I commend that. But my wife and I had a discussion yesterday, I believe, that the way that this type of acts or these things are going to stop is the nation at large has to move swiftly, just like the Minneapolis mayor. All right, charge them, fire them, and charge them. Fire them, charge them, and put people to justice, just like everybody else is brought to justice. And you have to answer for your actions or defend your actions in a court of law. Because at the end of the day, if I or you put our knee on back of somebody's neck and they die, we going to prison.
Yeah,
you best believe that.
Exactly.
We going to prison. We are going to prison. And in some cases, depending on who you kill, could be the death penalty.
Exactly. And just in case you guys haven't seen the video of the young lady and the gentleman in Central Park, basically there was a young was a white lady, and she didn't have a dog on a leash. There was an African American gentleman. He was,
and there's an ordinance to say your dog has to be on a leash.
And there's the ordinance of policies that says your dog has to be on the leash. The gentleman was out bird watching. She didn't have a dog on a leash. He asked her to put the dog on a leash. She gets angry because he's asking her to put the dog on a leash. He immediately starts recording. At that point, she becomes frustrated and angry at him. And then she said she's going to call the cops because he's recording. And then she said she's going to tell the cops that an African-American man is threatening her. He said, "Ma'am, please," while he continued to record. And she got on the phone, and that's exactly what she said. Glad that he had a camera. I'm going to ask you one more time because I thought it was so pivotal what you said, how that mindset leads us in the same direction of Mr. George Floyd. The mindset that the young lady had about weaponizing the fact that there's a fear or a disregard for black men or black people.
Because here's the thing, Dr. King said it, injustice anywhere is a threat of justice everywhere. And you got to catch this, Johnny. Not just the words, but I'm going to kind of break that down. Injustice anywhere is a threat of justice everywhere. Injustice in Sanford, Florida. Injustice in Long Island, New York, Eric Garner. Injustice in Ferguson, Missouri. Injustice. I can go on and on. Philando Castile. Injustice, Milwaukee. Injustice anywhere is a threat of justice everywhere. The mere fact nothing happened in those type of cases, not just those cases, but other cases, empower law enforcement of people who have the mindset of the Central Park woman that if I do this or engage, then I'm going to be justified because we've seen it over and over. So injustice anywhere put Mr. Floyd in the ground. Put the reason why Mr. Floyd is in the ground. That's why.
I see. I think back to the last time we spoke, a short week ago, and you were empowering everyone to report these instances that they see when it comes to law enforcement and different entities, government entities. If you see something that is, or you've been treated in a certain way, not to brush it off, because what if we didn't have the video? How does this play out, Mr. Jordan? We don't know how it plays out if we don't have the video, but if everyone is constantly reporting these people, because I remember studying Johnnie Cochran. He said, he worked with the LAPD so much that they were so corrupt that he won 10 straight murder trials, not based off of the fact that he was the greatest lawyer, which he was a very, very great lawyer, but the fact that the culture was so corrupt. So that law enforcement agency has been like that. They've been picking on people. They've been violating constitutional rights over and over and over again. But it got to a head because that was the culture that was built. You saw that because everybody stood there and watched.
Yeah, so, actually, that's a claim. That's a claim that can be brought under 1983, dealing with it's actually a policy, a custom, or atmosphere, or environment that has been created by a entity that is a completely disregard of a person, civil rights. And it's not really just disregard, but deliberate indifference. People don't realize disregard is one thing. Deliberate indifference, and I don't care what happened to you. A deliberate indifference, and that is a culture or custom that have pursued over a period of time, lack of training, supervision, or what have you. I'm sure that Minneapolis police officers have a use of force and excessive use of force policy. But the question is, are you subjecting officers to it through the training and the disciplinary acts when they engage or in the excessive use of force? I'm currently I just came back from Jacksonville, Florida, on the case, got a family on a case that 22-year-old male was shot and killed, a FAMU student, senior at FAMU, was shot and killed after he was pulled over for alleged seatbelt violation. It's been different stories from law enforcement that he had a gun that was licensed and it was struggled. He reached for the gun. As such, different accounts, as you see a lot of different times. There's no video in this case, but we do have multiple eyewitnesses who have a different story. In particular, we have one eyewitness who actually saw the shooting, saw the incident, and see that our client was outside of his vehicle with his hands up in the air when he was shot and killed. This is a case we actually about to file a lawsuit. They have already garnered national attention. And we're about to come in and file a suit on this case very soon. Here's one thing that I will tell you when it comes to video cameras and how the narrative is played out. And get prepared for this case and that case I just mentioned about in Jacksonville. I went through and saw some use of force, officer-involved shootings research. And whenever there's no camera involved, the same story was said. When an officer shot and killed somebody who did not have a weapon. According to the officer, the suspect was reaching for his waist. At that time, the officer fired his service weapon, striking and killing the suspect. However, no weapon was recovered at the scene. I read it 10 times in multiple reports. The same paragraph. The same paragraph. In one of the incidents, the suspect or the person who was killed, you'll see that he was running away from the officer. He turned around and looked at the officer. Officer shot him in the head. 5 witnesses attest to that. The district attorney, state attorney, said he felt like their story wasn't credible. He took the officer rendition of the facts to be credible because of his vantage point. But the other witnesses were there, determined that the force was justified. Video cameras, tell everybody video cameras are very, very vital to some type of justice. If it's civil or justice, maybe, or some type of criminal prosecution. But without it, you have no chance.
No chance.
You have no chance unless you get an officer that comes clean and tell the truth. Another officer stand by, tell the truth, or you got a lawyer that can really lay out the facts from the beginning. Like in this case, my guy should have been pulled over. He had his seatbelt on, had his window up, so the pretext based on seatbelt all is irrelevant. I mean, other stuff is irrelevant because he had a seatbelt on. But that's what you see over and over and over again. Mr. Floyd case, if the cameras never been there, then I mean, the other officers could say he was struggling, fighting, or whatever, and they had to continue to apply pressure, hold him on the ground. But I'm sure they want to say they applied pressure to his neck.
Exactly. And I've said this. I've said this on my channel several times, guys. When election season comes around and there are a few lawyers that you know in the community, or a few law enforcement officers that you know in the community, deputies that you know in the community, go ahead and start finding out who's running for head DA, who's going to be your head prosecutor in the county, because these are the people across America that can empower justice or injustice one way or another, and how fast that they act, how slow they react. If they don't charge, if they send them to grand jury, it's so very important that you know who these people are. And I'm not just talking about, they came to your church and spoke and they were nice. I'm talking about the policies that they have in place as it comes to this. Because at the end of the day, like, officers can get arrested in some counties, and I as a criminal defense attorney, if an officer called me and he needed help in a situation, then I have no problem representing them now outside of this particular situation, because I think there's just an egregiousness with this. But everybody needs representation. The whole point I'm trying to make is make sure you know who your DA is. Find out information. If you don't know, contact a local attorney. It will give you the information that you need. Attorney Daniels, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know I texted you this morning. It was weighing on my heart so much, and I didn't want to bother you, but man, in Northeastern North Carolina, I don't want us to have things like this happening. And if it does happen, and we don't have people like you to give us information, and there's not a voice being heard, there are voices that have been heard, and I don't know if they're educated enough to speak to it. And that's why I wanted you to come and talk to my audience today and the rest of you. But I really, really appreciate you. And any parting words that you had, I really, really appreciate it. You can get back to your loving wife, man, and enjoying your day and fighting for our rights.
Hey, listen, thanks, Johnny. Anything I can do to help you out, man. This is an issue near and dear to my heart. And I would encourage lawyers who's out there who can hear my voice that pick the book up, Civil Rights. Just take a look at it. I mean, if it's not a practice area that you want to engage in, I completely understand. But if you are in private practice, you're a sole practitioner, don't be scared away based on the obstacles that's placed in it. This is a vital area of the law. And if you need help, give us a call. We can be reached. My phone number is 678-664-8529. DanielsandJamesLaw.com. I'm online. You can email me, Google me. We're here to help. But if you have a case, don't turn away from it. You in the community. I like to say that checks and balances. Who policed the police? I do. We do.
Mm-hmm.
We do. We police the police. When a law enforcement officer violates somebody's constitutional right, who's going to protect that person from the cloak of the state or the government? You do. Just don't look for that big medical malpractice or class action or that car accident case. I mean, all those things are noble things that's needed for justice. But I assure you, if you are in your community, you can be that equalizer. Because I promise you, if they know you there,
mm-hmm.
and they know you will not rest and you will pursue and seek justice, you may save somebody's life.
Mm-hmm.
may save somebody's life.
There it is. Real
Thanks,
conversation.
man.
Civil rights attorney Harry Daniels. Thank you again, man. Appreciate you. Love you, brother. Be good. Real conversations. We're out.
All right.